All right, hi folks. So today we are going to get started working on the piano keyboard. So I know that there are many of you out there who have already taken piano lessons and you've told me as such, and that's fantastic. I'm very, very happy to hear that you're taking piano lessons. So yes, some of this will be a little bit redundant. It means that you've already heard this before. But I really want you to make sure you are paying attention to this presentation because you never know. There might be some things in there that I tell you about that you don't know yet. So that's one of the cool things about music is every time we all think we know something, there's always something more to learn. And that's one of my favorite things about music. So, like I said, if you have already learned about the piano keyboard, that's great. But please watch this anyway. At the very least, you might learn just one or two new things, but there's always good information. Okay, everybody? So let's go ahead and get started with this here today. So, talking about the layout of the keyboard. So, it's really not 100% known the exact reason that the keyboard was constructed the way that it is. If I ask you to right now, you can probably close your eyes and imagine what a piano keyboard looks like. We've seen them enough to know that they are white and black keys. We know that they are laid out in a certain manner, which we're going to talk about later today. But the actual reason for it is not completely known. So, like with all inventions, the layout of the piano was eventually standardized by the people who were using it, and they did this for a couple of different reasons. They did it because of the way that they played. They wanted to lay it out in a way that made sense using all of their fingers. The way that they played it, the ease of use, making sure that the notes that were played most often were the ones that were more accessible. So, one of the more popular theories as to why the keyboard was laid out in this manner was to optimize the key of C. So, the key of C, for those of us that have learned how to play piano, is a very, very common key. It is the key that has no sharps or flats in the key signature. And what that means is that it does not use any notes that have been altered. It uses just the seven letters of the musical alphabet. So, prior to the introduction of keys, which establish a home base, so we're not talking about the keys on the piano, we're talking about keys as they relate to music itself, where we're talking about which note is home base, the notes that make sense to work together to play chords and to make these different melodies and make them sound coherent. So, before the introduction of keys, music was composed in something called a mode. And a mode in ancient music used only the pitches C, D, E, F, G, A, and B, so those seven letters of the musical alphabet. So it is thought, from the research that I did and what I could find, that the piano and the clavichord and the harpsichord before it were laid out the way that they are to optimize the key of C, meaning those modes that only used those seven letters. So the keyboard of the piano and other piano-like instruments were created around the modes, and as we're going to see, the white keys of the piano are labeled using the seven pitches of the musical alphabet. So moving on here, I mentioned the word mode. So what is a mode? And a mode is simply a grouping of pitches that is used in various different compositions. Now there's a lot more that goes into modes than just a grouping of pitches. However, I'm not going to go into that right now because that is not the focus of today's lesson. We are just talking about the layout of the piano keyboard, but I want you to know about modes just to have a little bit of background knowledge. So, why are modes important? And it's like I said before, they are the precursors or the things that came before keys, which is how modern music is written. So, to understand modern music, we have to have at least a little bit of understanding of those modes. So this is just the ancient modes that were at one point used. So if you're looking, you can see that they use the exact same notes over and over again, starting on a different one. So I'm going to turn on my little laser pointer here. So the first mode is something called Ionian, and that means that we start on C and move up through the musical alphabet C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. To get to the top of it, we would repeat that C, but we have just those seven letters. The second mode right here is what we call Dorian, and that starts on D. So we go D, E, F, G, A, B, and C, and then completing that high D there to finish out that scale. The third mode would start on the letter E. It's called Phrygian mode down here. You can see that's kind of a strange word, but that's okay. So we've got the Phrygian mode, E, going in order, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. The fourth mode down there, called Lydian, would start on F, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. The fifth mode is called Mixolydian, so similar, they're kind of related. Mode 5, Mixolydian, G, A, B, C, D, E, and then F. The sixth mode, called Aeolian, is starting on A, so kind of a cool little thing. It starts with A for the name and starts on the letter A, so that's kind of neat. You've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then the final mode, the Locrian mode, starts on that note B right there. B, C, D, E, F, G, and then A right there. So like I said, those are just the 7 ancient modes. We don't need to do a ton of work with those, but I want you to have at least a little bit of a passing familiarity with the names of those modes. This is actually something that I didn't learn until I was in college. So I kind of wanted to just share this with you, give you an idea of what it looks like. For you piano players, if you want to try playing these, that's great. At some point or another, I might play those modes for you so you can kind of have an idea of what they sound like, what they're starting to kind of have this sound for. So moving on from the modes, because again, that's not the whole focus of this, we're going to talk about the keyboard itself. So the keyboard itself is, simply put, a pattern of white and black keys. The white keys are right next door to one another. I'm going to turn on my laser pointer again here. The white keys are right next door to each other, so there are no spaces between those white keys. The black keys do have some spaces between them because they have a white key between each of them. So yes, they look like they might be right next door to each other, but if you are actually looking at it, this white key right here is between the two black keys. So they do not go right next door. They do not stay next to one another. So the groupings of the black keys are very specific. We have a group of 2 black keys here and a group of 3 black keys over here. So this is a great way that we can start to kind of see what is going on with the keyboard and have a visual to help us with this. So like I said, grouping of 2, grouping of 3. There are anchor notes. There are notes that make sense by looking at these right here, which is what we're going to talk about now. So the first black key right here is where we're going to start because we are going to use this as our reference point. So if we start here on this first black key and we go to the white key that is immediately to the left of it, so immediately before it, we have our starting note, and that is going to be C. So that is going to be one of the very first notes, if you take piano lessons, that you're ever going to learn, is you're going to need to identify where C is. And like I said, to do that, you look for the grouping of 2, go to the first one, and go down to the white key, and boom, right there. So as we continue on with those white keys, we're just going to go in order of the musical alphabet. So after C, we go to the next letter, which would be D. If we continue on, what do you think it's going to be? C, D, what comes next in order? It would be E. Absolutely. So moving on one more, we have F right there. Now again, you can look at this first set of 3, and you can start to memorize that F is the anchor note of those 3 right there because you have the 1, 2, 3, and you move down just like we did for C over here. 2 goes down to C, 3 goes down to F. All right. So after F, we go over to G. That's the next note in order. Now, when we have the musical alphabet, please remember that we do repeat that musical alphabet. So when we get to the end of it, which is G, we simply go back to the very beginning, which is the letter A right there. All right. Last but not least, we end with the note B. So those are our white keys right there. C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. Now, can you technically start anywhere on the keyboard? Yes, of course. You absolutely can. But most of the time, we are going to start at that note C and use that as our home position. It's very much like the keyboard. If you have learned touch typing, which hopefully you have, you've got on the letters F and J, you've got those two little ridges right there. And what those do is they show you where your fingers are supposed to go just by touch. It's kind of similar. Now, obviously, there's not a little ridge on any of these notes to show you where to be, but this is what you can think of as the home row, that C, D, E, F, G, A, and B right there, where we start identifying where those pitches are. So now the other thing that we have to do is be able to understand where the notes go on the treble clef. So the treble clef is the only one that we've learned so far. Now, if we still think about that, we have our hand staff and we have every good boy does fine, starting there at the bottom. Then the spaces, F, A, C, and E, facing the space. So if we think about the house analogy, we can remember that below the staff is the D for downstairs, and the ledger line becomes C, like middle C. If you go up above the staff, you've got the G sitting on top for gutter, and the A for attic. Sorry, middle C is crawl space. I think I forgot to say that part. So if we're talking about C right here, this is actually going to be our middle C. So not all the C's that we have on the keyboard are middle C. I want you to be very clear about that. There is only one middle C, and we'll get into that in a little while. I just want to give you a kind of basic overview for today. So middle C right there, the one that's down below the treble clef, is C next to that grouping of black keys right there. As you move to D, you're going to go one step higher, which is D like downstairs. As you move step by step by step, you've got E right there on the first line, moving up to F, then G, A, and B. You can see that pretty clearly right here from those various different pitches on the piano keyboard. You have the corresponding pitch on the staff. Now, one thing to make note of here, folks, you do not stop at B. Now, obviously, we have lines that we know that there are more letters for, right? Like we have C up here, D, E, F, G, going up to A on the ledger line up above the staff. Now, it looks like the piano keyboard has stopped, but it doesn't, because the piano keyboard actually just is a big repeating series of octaves. Now, in the previous week, we had learned that an octave is a series of 8 steps, where you start on one pitch and by 8 steps later you get to the same letter, only it's going to be higher or lower depending on which way you're moving. So the keyboard has 88 keys on a standard piano. Now my keyboard back there does not have 88 keys. It is a smaller one. I think it has 34 keys perhaps. I honestly don't remember, 32 perhaps, but whatever. Now pianos do come in different sizes, yes. However, the standard concert grand piano, the one that we learned about last week that has the lid that opens up and all that kind of stuff, that has 88 keys on it. So that means that if you divide that down, 88 keys, you've got 11 octaves, I think, right? Yeah, 8 divided by 11. 8 divided by 88 is 11. So it's got so many different octaves on it that you have this big grouping of keys that you have to work with. Now, obviously, that would mean that as you continue to move through the keys, you are going to start repeating. So your C right there is going to repeat again, and then you still have D, E, F, G, and A up above the staff. Now, this is the full range of notes that we have talked about so far. C, middle C, up there through that high A. So this is what we call about an octave and a half, because we've got that next C is the octave. So you've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B. That's your first octave right there. Starting on that C, there's your second C, D, E, F, G, A. You don't have B or C, so it's a little bit less than 2 full octaves. So as you can see, all it does is repeat those same notes in the same order to get those different pitches on the staff. So hopefully this visual starts to help a little bit here, and you can start to kind of see where those notes are on the piano keyboard and how they line up with the treble clef. Because the keyboard seems like this big old mystery. If you don't know how to play it, you're looking at it and you're like, how am I ever going to figure out where those notes belong? Which one are they? How do I know what to play? And once you have a location that you can start with, a reference point, you can start to navigate anything else. It's just like anything else. If you ever plug map directions into Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever, you need to have a starting point, and that's what's going to be able to give you directions from where you are. So if we have our starting point here as middle C and we know exactly where that is, we can start to figure out where all of these are going to go on that piano keyboard. All right. So this is a very quick overview of the piano keyboard. And like I said, I know that some of you have already done this, so it is a little bit redundant. For those of us that have not, though, I hope that this was useful, and I hope that this gave you an idea of kind of what the piano keys are, what they look like, and all of that sort of stuff. The big thing that I want you to start to remember is the location of the pitches on the staff as they relate to the keys. Okay, so this right here is kind of what I want you to have. I'm going to be providing this same diagram in Otis, and I want you guys to make sure that you are starting to study this and starting to figure out where that all goes, the order of the keys. There will be some self-check questions here that we're going to do in a few minutes that are going to ask you to label the piano keys. It's going to ask you and show you a key. It's going to have an X on it, and you're going to have to tell me which key that is. So with those self-check questions in Otis, they are not part of your grade. They are for you to help to figure out if you are getting the material and internalizing that and starting to make that make sense for you. After you have finished the self-check question, it does not automatically tell you whether you got it right or not. You have to go back into the question and it will provide you with the feedback right there. So the little thing that's going to pop up in the top corner of your screen is just confirming that you have answered the question. Okay. When you go back into the question, it will tell you if you got that correct or incorrect. And like I said, that's not part of your grade. That's nothing to do with it. It's just to help to see if you are understanding this for your own feedback. Because let's be honest here, you have to take control of your learning. The only way that you get better at something is to practice, and the only way that you can practice is to test yourself and to do it yourself. Okay, folks? So, thank you very much. If you have any questions, please reach out. I am more than happy to work with you, more than happy to help you. And let's continue on with the next part. We're going to identify some of those piano keys.